Now, let me be upfront about something before we get into this. Dave Smith is not someone I align with politically, and that includes the fact that he was a Trump supporter. But I have to give credit where credit is due, because the level of clear, grounded thinking he's brought to the table on Trump's foreign policy decisions, on Israel, and particularly on this war with Iran is genuinely hard to argue with. And that says a lot. In this clip, we're going to watch a heated exchange between Dave Smith and Ben Ferguson, a man who is, without question, one of the most committed Trump sycophants in conservative media, a textbook MAGA loyalist. And what makes this clip so worth watching is that Ben Ferguson doesn't just lose the argument. He gets so thoroughly exposed that by the end, he resorts to calling Dave Smith an expletive on live television. That's how badly it goes for him. As always, I'm going to let the clip speak for itself first. I'll hold my commentary, my reaction, and my full breakdown for the end. Let's get into it.
When you said victory, that's why it's interesting to get you to clarify what victory is. When you said it, it's stopping the Iranians from developing a nuclear weapon, a dirty bomb. But that's what we were told had been achieved last summer. At the end of the 12-day war, Trump literally said that. We have stopped them developing a nuclear weapon. Mission accomplished. Here we are, less than a year later, 9 months later, and we're being told that victory will be if the United States and Israel stop the Iranians developing a nuclear weapon. But what's happened in 9 months?
Piers, great question. You have 60% enriched uranium that we know about that they still have. That's part of what we want to get out of the country. That is just taking data and looking at it and then saying, is this still a threat? How quickly can you get 60% to where it's military grade, to where you can get a dirty bomb? It's really damn close. So the president made another calculus here and said, okay, we hit those two facilities. They didn't stop what they were doing. They still have it way too close to military grade where they can do a dirty bomb. We know their intent is to kill innocent people and get a dirty bomb. They've said it over and over again. So therefore, because of that information, we are going to go in yet again, and we're going to make sure that America is safe and the rest of the world is safe.
All right, so Ben, do you accept that if the Americans and Israelis do not get the enriched uranium out of Iran, this is not victory, it is a failure, the war will have been lost?
I think there's two ways you can look at that. And again, this is coming from a military mindset. Number one is I talk to people in the military, they say, look, if they can't access it, right? If we bomb it in and we push it in and they can't access it anymore, that could be considered a victory from a military standpoint perspective. And again, this is way above my pay grade. That's why I ask other people questions that are experts. Would we love to get it out? Yes. But if we can't get it out and they can't get it out, that can be a victory. It depends on where it is. It depends on how much we bombed it. It depends on how secure it is if it stays in the ground there. So I don't say it's only one or the other, success or failure. It depends on the information on the ground. And if it is in a place where they're like, no one's going to be able to get to this, we can't get to it, neither can they, it's now unusable, that's a success as well. But I'd love to get it out of there. Yes, I don't like Iranians having anything close to it or having it in their backyard.
The problem is,
if you put it in the ground, it's done, it's done.
Let me come back to Dave. I mean, the problem is I've got increasingly limited confidence in the statements about the state of Iran's uranium and ability to build a bomb because of what happened last summer. I believed what I was told, that after the 12-day war, that was it. The threat had been neutralized. They couldn't build a nuclear weapon. That was it. And here we are in March. This was last summer. And in March, now we're being told they've got all this enriched uranium. None of it got removed last time. It's still there. And how are we going to know whether we've removed it from their ability to use it or not? We're not going to know. So, unfortunately, that to me doesn't look like a very substantive victory claim to me. It's just going to muddy the waters again.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and look, the fact that the goalposts just get moved so much, and like you said, Piers, not that long ago, just last summer, where all the people who supported the 12-day war were boasting and demonizing anybody who opposed it as what a success this was because we obliterated their nuclear program. But like, if we have to go back and fight a whole new war right now over that nuclear threat, then that was wrong. Then you got to admit you were wrong about it back then.
From Trump.
And if not,
Here is the quote from Trump, Dave. This is last year, after the 12-day war. I don't think they'll ever do it again. They've had it. It was a complete obliteration. They were set back decades. Turned out decades was actually 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, this is just too ridiculous to stand. And if I could just go back to the last point there, because, you know, seeing as how this whole thing started off of my claim of the U.S. regime being the biggest terrorist organization in the world, I mean, even if we are to accept Ben's interpretation of what Donald Trump was saying here, if you were just saying like, no, the Stone Age means we take out all the bridges and all the electricity, like, okay, but what does that mean? Well, hey, Ben, listen, we said the one thing was we're not going to interrupt. You've interrupted every time I've spoke, and I haven't done it once to you. So let me finish making a point here. So what does that mean? What does it mean when you take out the electricity to a civilian population of 90+ million people? It means babies on incubators die. It means people have heart attacks in their homes and can't get to the hospital because the bridge has been taken out. It means like the worst, most brutal level of human suffering inflicted intentionally on a civilian population. And if you want to sit here and play all these games where like it's terrorism whenever any of them do it, but it's counterterrorism if America or the Israelis do it, I mean, fine. It's like you picking on me for saying quagmire. Instead of quagmire, disaster, whatever word you want to use. At the end of the day, what you're talking about here is terroristic in nature.
A serious question. How do you do the calculus? And if we go with the premise that you just said about if you take out the electricity, by the way, you're assuming they have no generators at the hospital, which they do. You're assuming that ambulances can't run, they still can. But how do you do the calculus? If you take out all the bridges, it makes it tougher. But how do you do the calculus of Iran getting a nuclear weapon and then killing a whole lot of innocent people? Like, you're not, I don't like war, okay? I don't like innocent people suffering. But when I look at a nuclear weapon in the hands of a terrorist regime that sponsors more terrorism than any other country in the world in my lifetime, who's killed more American soldiers than any other regime in my lifetime, that's a fact, and a country that declares over and over again they want to kill you. If they get a nuclear weapon, and we did appeasement, which is what Obama did and what Biden did, and you just stuck with that, and then one day they get the bomb, and then they put it out in the world, and they blow up a city. How do you do the math on that one? Because you keep acting like America's doing something evil here, when all we're doing is trusting the terrorists when they say they want to kill you, and they keep doing it, that if they get bigger weapons and they get ballistic missiles, they're going to use them, which, by the way, they already have.
I mean, there's just so many just ridiculous presumptions built into that question. And
well, then tell me what they are, because I want to know. Because if Iran says they're going to get a nuclear weapon, they're going to do it.
You literally ask a question, I get 3 words out to respond to it, and you're already interrupting.
But you said there's so many ridiculous things I said. I asked you one question about a nuclear weapon. It's not a ridiculous list.
Yes, it is. Do I get a chance to talk now, or do you just want to ask questions to yourself? Is this just pretend, or are you actually asking? Sure,
it's not a hard question, Dave. That's the point I'm making. How do you do a calculus on Iran getting a nuclear weapon? That is not a list of things.
This is why I didn't want to do it with Ben also, Piers, because this is just how he debates. It's just, I can't answer or you won't shut up.
I asked really obvious, tough questions.
All right, Ben, you have given a solemn pledge not to interrupt.
This is just so ridiculous, dude.
Let Dave respond.
Okay, go ahead.
Just for the record, Ben, everyone can see through this tactic. Everyone can see through it. First of all, the intelligence going... There you go. Yeah. Every one of them can see through this bullshit. Okay, so the intelligence that we had leading into the 12-day war, which was right there in the annual threat assessment, which Tulsi Gabbard testified under oath in Congress, was that Iran had not made the political decision to start developing nuclear weapons yet. And so now you've got it as if we do nothing, not only do they have deliverable nuclear weapons, but they've used them offensively, which no country... Yes, you did. Which no country in the history of the world.
I said they had it 60%. 60% is not a nuclear weapon, Dave. Go back and listen to what I said. 60% is not a nuclear weapon. That is not what I said. This is why I interrupt you, because you make up shit that I never said. I never said they had a nuclear weapon. I used the word if and close.
Okay. Honestly, I'll just, if you want to let me speak, I will. Anyone can go back and listen to what you just said. I'm not claiming you said 60%
yes, please rewind it on YouTube.
Piers, do you remember the part where he said, and then they detonate a nuclear bomb over a city?
What?
Do you remember
Ben
that?
just said, Dave, everyone can rewind it on YouTube.
I mean, this is just so stupid, dude.
That was
a bit like when Marco Rubio
said what he said. Switzerland.
It's a bit like when Marco Rubio said, actually, the reason we preemptively attacked was because We'd heard the Israelis were going to go in, so we thought we'd better get in before the retaliation came. And the next day we were told that he hadn't said what we'd heard with his own mouth.
There you go, Ben. You just did it again. So anyway, the point is that, look, and as I've made this point before on your show here, Piers, I mean, this is just like, even the argument here. Look, we sat by, the United States of America, while Joseph Stalin developed nuclear weapons, and we knew he was doing it. While Mao Zedong developed nuclear weapons, and we knew that he was doing it. These are the most evil people who have ever lived. We didn't launch a war of aggression to stop them. Now, that doesn't mean you don't pursue diplomatic goals here, but to say Obama, and listen, Obama and Joe Biden had horrible foreign policies in a million different ways, but it's not true that appeasement didn't work. They had a deal. If 60% enriched uranium was the big concern, well, Iran was down to like 3% enriched uranium until Donald Trump tore it up. Now, there were sunset provisions in the JCPOA, and perhaps it would have been better to try to strengthen them, to try to come up with a better deal here. But instead, at the behest of the Israelis, Donald Trump insisted on these ridiculous negotiating strategies. This no enriched uranium at all, no civilian nuclear program, no intercontinental ballistic missiles, no supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or any of this. And this was never going to lead to a deal.
Support a terrorist organization.
Well, it's not.
You think we should allow that?
Great thing. It's not such a great thing when it leads to this.
And
now, is it?
Ben, the
it's
point I
leading
would
to
make,
death and destruction.
Ben, the question I have for you is, Ben,
oh, that's what you got.
Hang on, we should allow Iran to sponsor terrorist organizations.
Ben, if
he just said we should allow them in the deal to like sponsor Hamas and Hezbollah.
Ben,
like what the hell world are we living in?
Ben, let me ask you a question. Ben, if you're
the terrorist, Ben, you're the terrorist.
Ben, if your position,
I'm the terrorist.
Hang on, Ben. If your position is that if a nation espouses a desire to wipe out another country, then the country on the receiving end has an absolute right to not just defend itself, but attack the country threatening them, right? That's the defense for, right?
I think it also has to be based on, do they have the ability to do this?
So
right?
assuming ability.
Are they trying to get the ability to do it?
When the president of a country says publicly that he is going to, well, I'll read it again. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want it to happen, but it probably will. When a president of a country says that, presumably by your definition, Iran would now be perfectly entitled to attack the United States.
I think Iran's already been attacking the United States of America.
No,
That's why we're in this conversation right now. They've killed more American soldiers than anybody else in the world.
If they wanted to attack mainland America, by your criteria, they would have an absolute moral justification. Because you have a nation
I'm not
in
going to
America.
say it's a moral justification. What I'm saying is, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, the President of the United States of America has said to them, you need to make this deal and open up the Strait of Hormuz. This is all about land that's not actually theirs, and you're not going to hold the world hostage. And if you do, continue to hold us hostage. I am going to take out your bridges and your electricity, and that's on you. That is completely different than the scenario that you're asking. By the way, I wish you'd ask Dave the same question I asked him earlier. If they get a nuclear weapon and then detonated it somewhere in the world, how do you do that calculus?
Wait, hold on,
you still haven't answered the question yet.
But you didn't say that they detonated somewhere in the...
Rewind it, everybody, on YouTube, and you'll see exactly the question I asked.
Well, to be fair to Ben, he did say, what if they got a bomb and then used it to wipe out a city around the world?
Thank you. That's exactly what I said. Thank you, Piers, for being honest.
That's what I was claiming that you said, that you denied last time. You interrupted me when I said you were making that claim and said you never said that.
No, I said they didn't have the bomb. I said, if they got the bomb, how do you make the calculus? And you haven't answered that question yet because you don't know how to answer it. Your foreign policy is fraud, Dave. Your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand, bother no one, and then no one bothers you. And when you're dealing with terrorists, that never works. 9/11 is a great example of that, by the way. We were literally burying our head in the sand, acting like Osama bin Laden was not a threat after he kept saying he wanted to take out America. He wanted to go after America. And every president did the same thing. They buried their hand in the sand, and they said, we're not going to deal with him right now. We'll leave him alone.
Okay,
we won't get wars in the Middle East.
Let me ask you this,
so
Ben.
ridiculous and ahistorical.
Ben, what's interesting?
America was just not intervening. No, it's not actually. We were non-interventionist until 9/11. Yeah, right, please. We were bombing Iraq. We had a sanctions regime around Iraq. We had military bases in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, every one of the things that the terrorists objected to
what were we
were
doing in the Middle East?
interventions.
Nothing.
No,
We were
Bill
doing nothing
Clinton
when
had
9/11 happened in the Middle East.
The UN,
we were not.
Dude, you don't know what you're talking about. The
Were
UN
we
estimated,
invading a country in Iran on 9/11? No.
Can I finish
Were we
the
at war
sentence,
with
or are you
anybody
just
in the
going to
Middle East during
interrupt?
9/11?
Okay.
The answer is no. We were asleep at the wheel on 9/11. There's a reason why John Ashcroft wrote a book called Never Again, because we were so asleep at the wheel that we realized afterwards we can never allow it to happen again.
When Madeleine Albright was asked about how the UN had estimated that 500,000 children had died of starvation and malnutrition due to the Clinton blockade around Iraq, she said, and I quote, "That price is worth it." These were the non-interventionist years of peace and prosperity.
What? 92, 93, 94? We're talking about 2001. That's a long ways off, bro.
90,
I said, what were we doing when 9/11 happened in the Middle East? In the Middle East on 9/11.
Try
You're
1998.
almost 2 decades
earlier. No, I'm talking about 3 years earlier. You don't know what you're talking about.
And you said that Madeleine Albright said that in the early 90s. You just said 90s on the show.
I didn't
2001
say, I said in the 90s.
Is when 9/11 happened. Am I wrong?
1998 is when she made the comment. It was all through the Clinton years. Bill Clinton stopped being president in the year 2000, 1 year before 9/11. Sorry, this is
you're
just math,
saying
Ben.
that the blockade of food is what caused 9/11 now?
No, I'm not saying it. Osama bin Laden himself listed it as one of his stated grievances, along with the military bases.
One of a list that was like the Unabombers list.
Yes, that also involved the U.S. military bases on Holy Land in Saudi Arabia, and U.S. support for brutal regimes that oppress Muslims in the region, and U.S. support for the Israelis, who have been occupying, at that time, for 30-plus years, the Palestinian territory. Yes, this is basic history. You can say I'm a fraud, but you don't know any of this.
Hold on.
You don't know any of this.
So I'm correct in saying that your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand and hope that no one bothers you based on what you just said. Because you're saying anytime we stand up for us in the world, that immediately it's going to be our fault when we get attacked. That is your foreign policy.
Instead of you saying it, why don't I just say what I actually believe? What I believe is that we don't launch wars of aggression, wars of choice, reckless wars against countries that don't pose a threat to us. I'm defending the just war theory of Christianity and the constitutional system that the framers laid out. If we do have to go to war, there should be a vote in Congress.
Okay, so then here's my question. To every American that's watching that has lost a loved one at the hands of Iran, you're now telling them when they go to their graves on Memorial Day that Iran was not a threat to the United States of America, as you just described it, and who gives a crap that those American soldiers were killed at the hands of Iran and the terrorist regimes that they aid, sponsor, support, and give free passage to.
Here's a good rule of thumb here, Ben. If I didn't say it and then you just say you're saying it, no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we're going to get. No, I literally didn't say any of that. Yes, that's right. That part I said. Correct.
So
Iran
to the American families,
to the United States of America.
To the American families who've lost loved ones in a uniform who were killed at the hands of the Iranians and their terrorist proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and others they gave safe passage to. You're telling me that Iran was not involved in the murder of those American soldiers. They killed more American soldiers than any other regime in the world.
Ben, I'm sorry. I know I'm a fraud and I don't know a lot about foreign policy. Did you just say that ISIS is an Iranian proxy?
I said that they knew that ISIS was given safe passage to cross through at some points in the past. Yes, that's a fact.
They're a proxy of the Iranians.
I said proxies and including
they get along
like
so well.
I'm going to go back to asking the simple question I asked you a second ago.
Proxy?
If you are American and your loved one was killed at the hands of the Iranian regime and their terrorist proxies, you're telling me, and you want to look at those families in the face and say Iran is not a threat to the United States of America or our soldiers, even though their loved one died at the hands of the Iranian regime.
Okay, all I ask is that you allow me to answer that question since you've asked it now. Is that cool?
It's a yes or no, but go.
No, it's not a yes or no. I'll give you the answer.
Sure it is.
My answer to all of those families would be, if you had listened to people like me, people like Ron Paul, people like Pat Buchanan, our troops never would have been in Lebanon or in Iraq to begin with, and your loved ones would still be with you. But instead, you listened to the foreign policy of people like you, Ben, and that's why we were involved in those conflicts to begin with. Iran poses no threat to the United States of America, meaning the middle part of North America. Does Iran pose a threat to our ability to occupy Iraq? Well, actually, we were kind of on the side of the most Iran-linked militia groups at the time. But yeah, there was some fighting with some Shiites in there, too. It was another disastrous war that Piers Morgan was correct to oppose. And none of those boys would have been killed if they had listened to people like Piers.
So, Piers, let's be clear. Dave Smith's foreign policy is the only foreign policy in the world where American troops would never be killed. Glad we summed that up. Like, everybody go home.
No, if you're talking about the ones in Iraq, yeah, you just strawman every single thing I say and then claim I said something different.
No, because you have Americans that died at the hands of the Iranians, and you're acting like it was their fault that they died.
One thing. Let me just jump in. One thing's for sure. There will be more rewinding of this debate than in the history of Piers Morgan Uncensored. There's going to be frantic rewiring every time one of you says, I didn't say that. There's going to be a million people going,
get a counter and put it on social media. I'll win that one for damn sure.
The beauty of an uncensored YouTube channel is it's all there for posterity. Let me just, before we finish, I want to just bring up the fascinating kind of split that's going on the Republican side about this war. It's been bubbling away on other issues, but now it's really exploded here, Ben. And I want to play the clip from Tucker Carlson, that he really delivered the most astonishing rebuke directly to Donald Trump. Let's listen to this.
No, this is a mockery not just of Islam, it's a mockery of Christianity. To send out a tweet with the F word on Easter morning promising the murder of civilians and then saying praise be to Allah without explaining any of it, you are mocking me and every other Christian because we're Christians. We can't support that. That is evil. That is an intentional desecration of beauty and truth, which is the definition of evil.
Now, I can remember a time, Ben Ferguson, when you would probably wholeheartedly endorse that statement, but you can't now because you do a podcast with Ted Cruz. He hates Tucker, says he's evil. And so you're trapped really between probably ideologically agreeing with him. I've never heard you use the F word on air. I don't think you would, right? I think you would agree that on Easter Sunday, saying what Trump said would be outrageous and disgraceful, but I'm not sure you're going to say it now, are you?
Now, I will tell you exactly why I think the president put out that tweet. I think he realized just how evil the Iranian regime is. He was really angry and upset that they went after two of our pilots, and he had to work so hard to get them back and put other people's lives at risk. He's in the Situation Room. He's seeing what's happening. He's watching how tough that was. He's also really pissed off that you had a leak, that there was a second pilot down that came from the U.S. that then put his life in danger. And if I was the president of the United States of America, Piers, in that moment, I'd probably drop an F-bomb too if we're being intellectually honest.
Why don't you repeat right now exactly what he said?
I'm not one to drop F-bombs just to drop F-bombs on TV. Like that's not who I am.
Let me start it and you finish it.
That's not my guy.
No, you know what? You wouldn't say it, Ben. You wouldn't say it because I
have said when I was in a shooting, I said it.
And you certainly wouldn't have said it on Easter Sunday.
Piers, when I was in a shooting and I was the target of a gang initiation, and when I came home, you better believe I dropped the F-bomb for the very first time in front of my parents. I don't know. That day,
you wouldn't.
probably.
I've never heard you do it on air.
I said it in court. I said it in court when I saw the guy for the first time, and they had to bang the gavel and said, you can't say that in court. If I'm the president of the United States of America in that moment, and I'm trying to get Americans back, I would hope the F-bomb would bubble up in your mind a little bit. I really do. It means he cares.
Piers, can I just
say, he cares about the people he's trying to go get.
Listen, by the way, it's just such a juxtaposition here, like the irony that I'm just kind of like the shit-talking comedian and Ben's the suit and tie conservative guy, and who Ben, when he was supporting Ted Cruz in the 2016 primary, would have been just like all the other conservatives saying like, Donald Trump is too vulgar and unserious and all of this stuff. And I'm telling you as me, someone who will drop F-bombs on almost every podcast that I'm on. It's not even just a matter of will you say the word. Great. It's not a matter of will you say the word. The president of the United States of America on Easter, while he's talking about a war that innocent people are dying in, and then mocking Allah. I'm sorry, man. And I know, Ben, you're boxed in to just not say the obvious.
It's not
it
boxed
is disgusting.
in. I gave you my explanation why I think you said it.
It's an embarrassment. No, you just took a little shot at me.
You just don't like the explanation. The president just got back two American soldiers that were shot down
on Easter.
See, I think to me, Ben, there's a middle.
He got him shot down.
To me, Ben, there's a middle ground. You don't have to go full Tucker.
Hold on, did you just accuse Donald Trump of getting two pilots shot down?
Yes, by launching this stupid war.
Okay, here.
All of the death is on him.
This is why people, Dave, think you're an asshole. For that exactly right
dude,
there.
What do you mean
like,
people think this?
You don't blame terrorists. You don't blame terrorists when they do things. You only blame the United States of America, which goes back to the point. I genuinely think you probably hate America. Or you hate Donald Trump so much that you hate America by default. Like, you just blame the president for terrorists going after our guys.
Sure.
That's when they say you hate America. You actually hate America.
Hey, Ben, let me ask you a question. Let's say that our government did become something that you would consider a terrorist regime. Let's say like real Nazis took over the United States of America, okay? Hypothetically, thought experiment. And they started doing Nazi stuff. They were really terrorists, whatever you would define that to be, which you never really define it.
Well, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I'm tracking with
let's say, me too. Okay, so let's say they real terrorists take over the American government, and now the government's doing real terrorist stuff. If I were to call them terrorists, does that mean I hate America?
I think you're calling the American government a terrorist organization with facts. If you're talking about the way you are, that's with evidence. Okay,
so the debate,
that's with evidence.
Right.
You're not. There's no evidence here on what you just claimed that Donald Trump got them shot down. That's completely different than Nazis. You should be intellectually honest enough to have that. No, those are two very different things. Is Donald Trump a Nazi now? Is that what you're saying? Is Donald Trump a Nazi? Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think you can follow a logical analogy here.
It's one hell of an analogy, my friend. You're like, well, Donald Trump's the reason why they got shot down. Let's blame Donald Trump. I think that's anti-American. I think the president trying to keep us safe is pro-America. And I think the president going after a terrorist regime is always a good thing.
Again, I'll take the people with IQs above 90 who understand the logical analogy I was just making. But Ben,
when you're losing an argument when you have to go after my IQ, which is above that, by the way. But like, come on.
Okay, keep interrupting. No, I'm not. I didn't go after your IQ. I went to the IQ of the
above
people
a 90. You were implying mine was below 90. I can figure that out because I have above a 90 IQ, bro.
No, actually, you can't, because I'm implying that only people with a 90 IQ would believe your line of bullshit. Nothing about your IQ was implied there, actually. But anyway, you want to say this is why the people think I'm an asshole? Okay, again, like I said with Adam, man, let's see what the response from the people is. This is why the people think you debate in a really dishonest way.
Okay,
let's see what people think more. That's the idea here.
That is a perfect way to end, because we'll let the people decide.
All right, so now that you've watched that in full, let's talk about what just happened. What Ben Ferguson represents is exactly what MAGA has become in 2025. These are not serious political thinkers. These are not people who engage with facts and adjust their positions accordingly. That is precisely why the word sycophant exists, because these are individuals who cannot bring themselves to criticize Donald Trump under any circumstances. No matter what the evidence says, no matter what the facts are, they will tie themselves in logical knots, misrepresent what people said, shout over their opponents, and deflect every hard question, all to avoid ever having to say the words, "Trump got this wrong." And you saw that play out in real time. When Dave made the straightforward, logical point that launching a war while Iran was still at the negotiating table was a decision that belongs to Donald Trump, Ben Ferguson's response was to completely melt down and accuse Dave of calling Trump a Nazi. That is not a serious debate tactic. That is the behavior of someone who has run out of road and knows it. And here's the reality that Ben Ferguson simply cannot confront. This war with Iran was, by any objective measure, unprovoked. Iran was at the table, negotiations were ongoing, and Trump made the same call he made the previous summer. The same summer where he and his supporters declared total victory, said Iran had been set back decades, and attacked anyone who questioned it. Less than 9 months later, we're back to square one, fighting the same war over the same nuclear threat with the same goalposts being moved all over again. That is not a foreign policy success. That is a failure dressed up in new language. That is exactly why Piers Morgan and Dave Smith were able to dismantle Ben Ferguson's arguments so completely and so consistently throughout this entire exchange. Ferguson had no ground to stand on because the facts simply don't support the position he was sent in to defend. And here's the thing that really matters: the hypocrisy test. If Barack Obama or Joe Biden had done exactly what Donald Trump has done here, started a war while diplomacy was still active, declared premature victory, and then returned to fight the same conflict less than a year later, people like Ben Ferguson would not have been sitting there calmly making excuses. They would have been absolutely furious. They would have called it a foreign policy disaster, a national embarrassment, and a betrayal of American troops. But because it is Trump, the rules don't apply. The goalposts move, the criticism disappears. And that double standard is not a coincidence. It is the entire point. This clip exposed Ben Ferguson for exactly what he is. Not a political commentator, not a serious analyst, just someone whose job at this point is to make sure Donald Trump never faces an honest reckoning, regardless of the consequences for the rest of us. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know what you made of this exchange. I'll leave a link to the full episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored in the description so you can watch the entire thing, and I'd strongly encourage you to do that. If you found this breakdown useful, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up, share it, and subscribe.